Hello, hello. Um, Thank you for being here. So, how many of you saw Claire's talk yesterday? Oh yeah, good amount. So, something that Claire said yesterday that really struck a chord with me was this idea that she thought, the web was once a place where uh, she felt like it was her country. And now she feels like she no longer recognizes the web as her own country. And that actually kind of gets at the heart of what I want to talk about today. And using this spatial metaphor is also it's appropriate for what I want to say. My talk is called Notes on Patterns, and specifically, I want to sort of talk about the patterns that make up the sort of good qualities of social networking. So, like Severine said, it's really easy to think about like what are all the sort of bad things about social media, and there's a lot of ways we can critique it, but if we want to move forward, if we want to build new platforms, if we want to improve existing platforms, we have to sort of recognize the things also that are working. What I'm going to do is show you some examples of patterns that you can think about in the platforms that you use, and start to kind of recognize like how we can develop a language for describing what is working and what isn't. And I'm going to use Are.na as an example because that's the platform that I know the best. But spoiler alert, if you get anything out of this, it's just, think about what is working in the platforms that you use. I'm going to start with what Are.na is, which after 7 years of building it is still somehow a challenge for me. And then I'm going to talk about some of the patterns that we've noticed that have helped build a relatively healthy community online. And before I sort of get into it, I want to add a disclaimer that Are.na is pretty small in size and population size compared to most of what we think of as social platforms. So there's about 100,000 accounts, which sounds like a lot when you think about that many people, but relative to other platforms, it's kind of nothing. This is our official tagline, a platform for connecting ideas and building knowledge. And in my slide notes here, it says pause for dramatic effect. So, yeah. All right. So what we're interested in is that in 2019, the sort of big problem is not really access to information. It's how do we make meaning from information? How do we take all this stuff that we're sort of inundated with on a daily basis and make it personal and make it new and use that stuff to sort of build new ideas and new knowledge? That is a very abstract way of describing it. So if I were in the real world, which this is completely not the real world. If I was at like a dinner party with my parents' friends or something, I would probably just say something like, "Oh, it's like Pinterest, but it's nerdier," or something like that. So what it looks like is this. You have channels, which are essentially collections of things, and then you have blocks, which are the things inside them. So blocks could be images or text or links or files, sort of any information you can throw onto Are.na. And this example here is, you can kind of see at the top, the title is Are.na Influences, so it's sort of a meta example. This is the channel that we use when we find things in the world or online that sort of strike a chord with us to like get at the heart of why we're building Are.na. So when we find something, we throw it in here, and over time, this sort of develops. It has one meaning, and then when you add more things, it has a different meaning, and that perspective sort of changes as more things are added to it. So the two definitions, channels are approximately equal to a folder, and a block is approximately equal to a file. Channels can be either public or private, meaning public meaning that anyone can look at it. Private meaning that only you and people you deem as collaborators can look at it. And then channels can also be open, so like more like a wiki style, anyone with an Are.na account can add to them. And this is basically the structure of Are.na. But people use it for a lot of different things. So some people use it to take notes on books that they're reading. Someone is taking notes on a book called Beyond the Corporate University, heady stuff. Some people use it to save PDFs and articles for things that they're researching. Some people use it to make playlists of YouTube videos, like the golden ages of music production. People use it to keep track of visual trends. This is a channel called Eggs and Art and Design. And so, yeah, hopefully you get the rough idea. It's basically just a place to put all the stuff that you're interested in or thinking about, and doing it in a way that could be public or private. And shout out to Darius here, that's his website on the bottom left corner there. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about some patterns, specifically in the sense of a pattern language. So who here has heard of this book? Oh, cool. Okay, so for those who haven't, this is like a deep wormhole, and like I'm excited for you in the future. So I highly recommend looking into this. It's a book that was written by architects, physical architects. It was written in 1977, and the people who wrote this had the observation that some of the most wonderful places in the world were not actually built by architects, they were built by humans. And Christopher Alexander and his co-authors were really interested in what human-oriented spaces would have on, quote, community. So they collected these patterns that they observed of spaces and places that felt good or healthy or conducive to people coming together. So, for example, this is like all the chapters are broken up into these patterns. And chapter 61 is a pattern called small public squares. I'll just read the beginning. So, a town needs public squares. They are the largest, most public rooms that the town has. But when they are too large, they look and feel deserted. Therefore, make a public square much smaller than you would at first imagine, usually no more than 45 to 60 feet across, never more than 70 feet across. This applies only to the width in its short direction. In the long direction, it can certainly be larger. This will all be on a test. It's sort of prescriptive, but you kind of get the idea that being in small public squares is like, it feels good. And the cool thing about this approach is it's very human-oriented. And the other thing about this is, what I would like to do with this sort of analogy is apply it to online spaces. And I think that using spatial metaphors to sort of describe or diagnose online spaces is actually really useful. If you think of maybe your most favorite social network or your least favorite social network, and then try and imagine what it would look like as a physical space, it's really easy to imagine if it's like a place that you would want to go every day or not. It's tempting to like give you an example, but I'm not going to. So I would like to apply this model or this way of thinking to what we're interested in today, which is the future of social platforms. So I want us to think about the good experiences that we've had online, the nice interactions, the things that we've learned, and then think about the structures or the attributes of those platforms that have helped those things take place. So I'll give you some examples. Is the platform oriented towards active use or passive use? And things like active use is things like writing or doing something that takes brain power. Passive is like clicking a like button or something. Does the platform have a focus or purpose? Is it oriented towards a specific goal, or is it just about communicating? Is it oriented towards introverts or extroverts? This is one that I like to think about as a self-proclaimed introvert. A good way to test for this kind of thing is does the platform have a meaningful way to be alone on it? Is it open-ended or restrictive? So like Twitter, for example, a lot of the like @ and hashtags all came from users of Twitter actually created all of those things, and it's very open-ended. And then there's things like Facebook, which is more restrictive and prescriptive about how you interact. What's the scale? What's the population diversity? Do people have a sense of ownership of the platform? Is there a way to meaningfully steer the direction, or is it just limited towards interacting with other users? And so on. So I could actually talk about this all day long, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to focus on 2 of these things and use Are.na as an example and tell you how we think about this in terms of Are.na. On Are.na, with regards to something like active versus passive, the whole idea of Are.na is that it's a tool for taking information and making it your own. So it should also work, by the way, without any community involvement. So you should be able to use it in single player mode. So then that sort of logically follows that the onus is on the person to sort of do the work on the product to get the most out of it. And putting that in other words, the more active you are on Are.na, the more you get out of it. So as an example, on Are.na, there's no such thing as a like. Instead, we have something called a connection. So if you see something on Are.na that you're interested in, it's not enough to just click like a star. You actually have to add it to another channel and think about where that thing also belongs. So in this screenshot, this is a work by Lawrence Weiner. It was originally added to our Are.na Influences channel. You can kind of see the list of connections on the right, or an abbreviated list of connections on the right, and then I'm like adding another connection to it. And so the things that are, the content that's on Are.na gets imbued with additional perspectives as more people come across it. And the cool thing about that is that you save things in public, and now they have a life of their own. They sort of get added to over time. And then I would also add that this is a much harder action to take. It takes a bit of a cognitive load to think about where something belongs. And that is actually totally by design. So the result of that is something like this. So this is a visualization that a person named Sam Hart did using our API to make these little neighborhood maps starting from an initial channel and working the way out. And the interesting thing about this map is all of this stuff is done by totally unrelated other people who aren't like acting in a coordinated effort at all. But you probably can't read the text, but it's extremely coherent. So in the middle there's a channel called State of the Web. And branching out from it on the left, there's a channel called Slow Web. On the top, there's a channel called Printed Web. Shout out, Paul. On the right top, there is a channel that I just noticed this morning called Dad Bod Web Design. On the right, there's a channel about like learning how to code, and so on. So these are all people who are sort of acting independently, but have come together to make this sort of very coherent network of information. And that's what that little bit of cognitive load does. But it also sort of gives the power to the people. I can't believe I just said that. That's totally not on my notes. Well, it gives a sense of ownership to the people because any individual person can sort of shape the content that they see on Are.na, which, surprise, surprise, leads me perfectly to my next slide, which is a sense of ownership. So on Are.na, there's actually a lot of different ways that we try and let people steer the direction of the platform. One of them, well, for one, most of our platform is open source, We have some people who use Are.na who are also owners of the platform, but the one that I want to highlight is these very public open channels where we solicit feedback and feature requests from people. And we have other channels, like I have this channel called How Do You Describe Are.na at a Party, which is somewhat useful for situations like this right here. And other people also make their own kind of meta Are.na channels where they ask other people how they what kind of workflows they have. But the coolest one, I think, or the one that I wanted to highlight, is this feedback that we got a little over a year ago where someone requested that we remove follower accounts on profiles. And the cool thing here is that you can see on the right all of these are comments. It was kind of, it might be one of the most commented on blocks in Are.na, and it's everyone in favor of removing follower accounts. So everyone was totally aligned on this. And we were actually, thinking about this already, but this kind of thing made it very easy to like reprioritize what we were doing and take it away. So that's about all I have time for, but so the sort of conclusions that I want to just wrap up, what we've learned is that it's better to orient towards active use rather than passive use, and platforms are also better when the people who use it can sort of steer the ship. But I encourage you to think about the platforms that you use in these terms. So how can we break down parts of this? How can we think about applying these to other platforms? Or how can we take those attributes and sort of lean into them more and make them better? And if you have ideas for this stuff, this is my email. Please feel free. Thank you.